Mr. Streeter, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. I beg to move that this House has considered grandparents' rights of access to children. I'm pleased to be able to bring this important debate to the House today because the issue of grandparents being able to access their grandchildren is one that affects a number of families right across the UK. I've received a significant amount of correspondence from my own constituents who write to me after family breakdowns and changing circumstances, seeking guidance on how to go about reaching out to their grandchildren or to having legal access. Mr. Streeter, I adored all of my grandparents from both my mum and dad's families and have fond memories of them from when I was growing up. But it's a sad reflection that we've not managed to properly reflect in legislation the hugely important role which grandparents play in our society. My own dad adores his grandchildren, Finley and Neve, and they adore him back. So whenever I'm contacted by constituents, I naturally refer to my own family and simply cannot imagine how hard this must be for everyone involved to not have contact. As many members will know, this is never a straightforward issue to resolve. The distance between grandparents and their grandchildren can come about through a number of different ways: marital breakdown, bereavement, and family disagreements, to name but a few. For the separated grandparents and indeed the children, this can be an incredibly distressing time for all of those involved. I know that this issue has been discussed previously in the House through the introduction of private members' bills, adjournment debates, and indeed with conversations I've had with colleagues from across the House. However,
I wish to congratulate him heartily for raising this important issue in the House today. I want to reflect as well that frankly, he's received, as I have received, many communications which show the real emotional turmoil that many grandparents feel when they are estranged from their grandchildren. And does he also agree with me that it's always an error when these situations, divorces, domestic divorce can be used, sometimes grandparents are used as weapons in such divorces?
Thank you, Mr. Streeter, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Solihull, for his intervention. And I do agree with him that it can be very distressing, and it's obviously wrong for children to be used as weapons by anybody in any situation. But it's very distressing for everybody involved, and very often the constituents that have come to see me, I only see their side of the version of events and not the children involved. And I can tell from my own family that that would be very distressing to not see their grandparents. However, Mr. Streeter, it's an issue that does not go away or have a simple solution, as much as I would wish that there were one. In debates such as this, it's important to remember the rights of the grandchildren matter as much as those of the grandparents. Children should also be given the opportunity to visit their grandparents if they wish to. I'd also like to use this opportunity in the debate to praise charities and organisations who aim to help grandparents who've become estranged from their grandchildren, often through no fault of their own. One such charity is Grandpart, which operates in my constituency of Northampton South and aims to help grandparents in the county with advice and services that allow them to try and reconnect with their grandchildren, or at least to share their experiences with others and try and share best practice of what's happened to try and reconnect with their own families. I've attended this monthly meeting and listened to some of their distressing stories of how grandparents have ended up losing contact with their grandchildren, sometimes because arguments have gone too far, sometimes it can be due to families separating, and sometimes people never really understand the reasons why. Some in the sector have written to me to suggest ways in which this situation could be changed, with a few minor amendments in the wording of the Children's Act. This primarily means adding in a reference to a child's extended family as well as the involvement of their parents. This minor change could ensure that grandparents are given similar rights to their grandchildren as any parent in order to help secure the child's welfare, and also ensure that grandparents are not negatively impacted by any change to a child's family situation. However, I can also see situations where this could lead to conflicting issues. The primary responsibility for bringing up children in most families lies with parents, and I would not wish to see any situation where parental responsibility could be confused in any way by giving additional rights to grandparents which supersede the role of a parent, or as my honourable friend, the member for Solihull, said, to be used as a weapon in any disagreement.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend for giving way. He will recall that on January the 31st of this year, my constituent, Lorraine Bushell and the Hendon Grandparents Support Group had a lobby day here in Parliament. And one of the issues that they raised, it wasn't seeking that parents or grandparents have a specific specific right to access their grandchildren. It was the right of the child, as in France, that they can have contact with their extended family.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter. I'm grateful for my honourable friend for his intervention. I do recall the day that was held here. In fact, I think it was held in a room not too far from here, and it was packed to overflowing. Lots of members were there present to lend their support to the campaign and also to receive some of the advice and best practice that was offered on the day.
Thank my friend for giving way. He won't be surprised, only dismayed, to know that at my last surgery I saw grandparents who were suffering in this way too, and their plea was, could there be a change in thinking around this, a change in culture, because they'd been advised that their only recourse was through the courts, and they didn't want to put their grandchildren through that, and they didn't want to further make any new tensions within the family.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter. I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Eastbourne, for her intervention, and I've had similar such constituency surgeries where similar stories have been relayed back to me. I'm also grateful to the honourable member's intervention previously, where he talked about the law in France, and I think that is something that should be considered, and I'm sure the Minister will come to that when he talks later. Because I understand that the law in England and Wales gives the family court the power to make various orders about children, including with whom they can spend time. For grandparents, they will be required first to seek the permission of the court before applying, but this would likely be allowed if deemed in the child's best interests. Perhaps, and this is an issue for the Minister to address, this could be reconsidered to give grandparents an automatic presumption for the family court. When grandparents lose access, it can be even more difficult without having any access to information about the children or knowing their whereabouts. In a similar way to the member for Eastbourne described, at my surgery, a lady came to see me. She told me that she didn't know where her grandchildren were living, she didn't know what they looked like anymore, she had no access to their information about them. She would love to have had contact with her grandchildren, but it also kept her very worried and not having any information about them or knowing if they were safe or being looked after. In that situation, I was able to write to the local county council in Northamptonshire and ask that if any information was able to be passed back, then I could. They simply replied to say the children were safe. Clearly, sometimes there are obvious safeguarding reasons why information cannot be shared, but I do think this could also be looked at again to see how the law can protect safeguarding issues whilst also allowing grandparents to have basic information about their grandchildren, just to feel reassured that they are safe and well. I hope that after the election, the issue of grandparents' access to children can be taken forward by working together to ensure that the voice of grandparents is also taken into account when working with families. I'll draw my comments now to an end, Mr. Streeter, but also look forward to hearing contributions from other honourable colleagues in this debate and from the Minister.